Hi, Julian Smet. I think I pronounce your name perfectly. Is it true?
Not exactly. So it is Guillaume.
Oh,
And
almost.
Smet it is, yes.
Smet it is. Guillaume?
Guillaume.
Guillaume.
Yes.
Guillaume?
Yes. Now it's perfect.
Now it's perfect. So it was a North French accent, right?
Yes, exactly. So it's the equivalent of William or your Wilhelm in Germany.
Okay.
And it's a French equivalent of that. Okay. So it's a very common name in France. And I was quite surprised when I joined RedHat because absolutely nobody was able to pronounce it correctly.
Except me.
And except you, of course. And it was fun. At first, I didn't understand my name when the others were talking about me. So when there was some quiet and I vaguely understood my name before, I was like, oh, it's probably my turn to speak. So,
okay.
Yeah, that was quite a fun experience.
Yeah. Now, what was your first computer?
Oh, it was an Amstrad CPC. Back in the days. To be honest, I didn't do much coding on that. My father did. So he was basically, he took the book from the Amstrad and was basically typing the long listings that were in there to code your first game and things like that. And he wasn't understanding anything that he was typing. He was just typing what was in the book and exactly. And in the end it worked. And I didn't really code on this one. I started coding far later with a PC compatible Pentium 75. So really far later.
This is basically what I did. I also tried, to learn from a book. By the way, it was a French book, and I had no idea about French. So what I could understood, was the basic code and no explanation.
Yeah.
And it never worked in my case. So I typed a lot, did some small mistake, and it never worked. Was your father more successful?
Yes, he actually. There was some Pong game in the book, and he actually made it work.
Okay.
It took a few tries, but he was able to get it to work.
How many hours you spent, gaming with his game, playing his game?
So it was kind of lame, but I think we spent a few hours with
nice.
my sister on it. But yeah, it was very lame.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. And so you start playing with the CPC, I think, right? So this was your first action. So you bought games and played with it.
Yeah, we bought a few games, but back in the time, you were basically trading discs with your friends and acquaintances. And we had a few games, and that was basically the only interactions we had with the computer.
So when you started coding then, was it the Amstrad or another machine?
I think I was 16 or 17, and I didn't do much back in the time. I actually really started coding when I got to, when I was 20 years old. We had this, basically for my engineering school, we needed a website to push some information to the students and discuss with each other and things like that. And I basically developed the whole things with a couple of friends, and that's really when I started coding. I needed a purpose, something. I needed someone to tell me, "Oh, we really need to get that done," and then I just started doing it. So it was in PHP. Back in the days, PHP 3, and with a PostgreSQL database. And that's how I started to love PostgreSQL. And that's really, I think that's really the starting point of my career. Before that, it was just for fun.
And you enjoyed the PHP or HTML experience? I mean, How was the start? Because without any knowledge, because you had to understand first that PHP generates a string, and the string is, sent to the browser, and the browser interprets the string. So it is not as easy. So if you would start with Hello World, I would say it's easier in terminal. If you start with a server, maybe it's harder, right?
Yeah, so the tooling for PHP was quite simple, and that was probably the main advantage of it. Back in the days, you had Apache HTTP servers, the PHP module all running, and you just needed to write your pages. You could really make a big mess with it, and I think we started making things far cleaner when PHP 4 got out. It was really far better. One thing that I think really helped with the learning experience was that PHP was keen to embark new developers, people who didn't really have coding experience before that. And you had a lot of very simple documentation to start. The documentation was really nice. The language was totally inconsistent. That was, I think, the main problem with it. But the documentation was nice. You had a lot of comments in the documentation, and it really made the experience quite easy. And frankly, at that point in time, to develop a web application, PHP was really nice. If you properly separated HTML and PHP and made some basic object-oriented programming, you could actually have something relatively nice.
When was it? Which year was it?
2001, I think, something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
We already had Java back then, I would say. And we had Java.
Yes.
And Java would be similar with JSPs. The problem was that you would need to have a Tomcat or something similar. So it wouldn't work, directly on Apache.
Yeah, I didn't really have a look at what was there at the time. Basically, we had a very old first version developed with PHP. So I just took that one, modernized it, made it far better. And that was the starting point of going with PHP. And that was, we didn't really, I don't know, we were students, we didn't really compare things like what if we do it in Java, what if we do it with, I know at the time it was the start of Zop. I don't know if you remember that one.
Soap.
It was Zop, yes. And so some people were playing with it, and basically we just took what was working and we just did it. Okay. So PHP it was. I discovered Java far later.
But your PHP project, was it big at the end? So was it complex or?
Yes, it was. It was quite big. We had a ton of feature on administration console. We had forums, we had news, we had directory with all the students. We with a relatively complex search engine. We had a ton of features related to the life of the students. We didn't have Facebook back in the time, and there wasn't any. We were using ICQ, and it was our way of communicating with each other. And,
by the way, this is how Facebook started, right? So what you wrote was a small Facebook.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was. I think it was a lot like Facebook was at the start, except we didn't have this. Let's not the girl that was the start of Facebook, and that was a bit creepy. I don't know if you have seen the movie.
Yeah.
So it was really about
the movie Social Network, right?
Yes. It was really about making sure we could communicate with each other, find each other, push the information about the student life, and that was basically it. And it's at the end it was a a relatively large project and a relatively good one. I think it lived for 10 years after we left the school.
Wow.
And it was, it was shut down 10 years later. So it wasn't that bad.
No, I mean, it sounds great. What's fascinating that, this was your first project, right? And became a small Facebook. So
yeah, the fact is that I need a mission to work on things, and basically I had one. We had some needs, some requirements to get something working. Mm-hmm. So that's really how it started. We need something to be done. Nobody works on that, and nobody is working to commit the time to do that. So I decided to do it myself, and I just got it done. It took me endless hours. I worked on that for, 1 year and a half. It took a few months to get the first version out, but then we added a ton of features. Mm-hmm. And it took one year and a half of my life to get this done. I also went to we also had school in the meantime. So I had to juggle between the school and this work. But in the end, it led me to my career. So I must say it was a good time investment.
Mm-hmm. How you collaborated with the other students? Have you used CSV, Subversion, or what was it?
Yes, exactly. So we were using CVS.
Oh, CVS, not CSV. Yes. CVS, exactly.
We were using CVS.
With locking, of course, right?
Yes, it was. It was really it was a bit messy, but at least we had that. I mean, at my first job, when I started, there wasn't even version control. Mm-hmm. We were all working on the same Samba share, and we were like, "Oh, I'm updating this file. Please do not update it."
Yeah.
And that was we were students, but we were working like professionals should work. So we had version control. We had a production server, a test server. We were developing on our desktops, some on Windows, some on Linux.
It's great. Sounds great. Where was it? In which city?
In Lyon.
Oh, okay.
So where I live, I still live there. Mm-hmm. I did my engineering school there, and I stayed there because I love the city.
Okay.
So it's in Lyon, in France.
So what is special about Lyon? Just nice.
I don't know. I like the rivers. So we have 2 rivers crossing the city.
Okay.
And that's quite nice. And the life here is pretty nice. I miss the sea a bit. So when I was younger, I lived in the north of France, mm-hmm. Near the North Sea. And I miss this sea. So the sea with the rain, the wind, mm-hmm. and the waves. Mm-hmm. And I miss that a bit, but apart from that, it's a nice city to live in, and I like it.
So what I understand right now is that the weather in Lyon is too nice, and you miss the rain and the storm, right?
Yes, a bit.
Okay.
I miss them a bit. So it's kind of weird, but when it's not raining for too long, I'm like, oh, I miss the rain. I need some, and I just got back from Brittany. Where I got some a nice storm with a lot of wind and a bit of rain, and it was very nice.
No, we have lots of nice storms also in Munich recently, so you would also enjoy the weather here. So, what was your next project after Facebook, or Facebook Lite, I would say?
Yeah, I joined an IT services company. That was my first job. Mm-hmm. And I worked on an application to build, I don't know how to say it. So it was for the French rail company, so the SNCF, and it was for them to publish their call for offers to the European Union. So basically, it was a web UI to build all the complex thing. Mm-hmm. and built the requirements for the offer. And then you were generating an XML file to send to the European Union so that they could include it in the stream of offers they have to publish. So it was it was a requirement for them to do that. It was in ASP, the Microsoft language, with some Visual Basic script. We didn't have the JavaScript support back in the time was very bad, to be honest. So it was a lot of fun with iframes. You had to push some events to an iframe to get something computed. Then you were getting that back and including it in your page. You didn't have all the fancy thing we have now with asynchronous request and things like that. So it was...
But it was normal back then. I mean, the entire Ajax started with the XHR, and before that, it was really hard to do something more interactive. You had to use iframes. I mean, or iframes, or at least frames or iframes, and so it was. I mean, it was like it was, right? Yes,
exactly. I worked on that for a while, but I was missing the open source. The open source way, I was missing it too much. I worked
Why you are missing this? Because you never worked with open source back then, right?
Yes, I did, because I was using PHP before.
Okay. So this is the PHP, okay.
Yes,
this was the
PHP, PostgreSQL.
Okay.
So it was, basically it was an open source layer, and I was missing the discussions, the documentation. It was relatively hard to find good documentation for ASP2, Visual Basic Script, and things like that. There was no one to share things with, ask questions to. It was I was missing the open source ecosystem and discussing with other people. So I left this particular company relatively quickly, and then went looking for a company where I could work with open source software. And it took me a while. But then I joined a company who was exclusively working with open source software, which was relatively rare. Back in the time, it was in 2003.
Okay.
So it wasn't.
They only spent 1 year at the company for the with Microsoft ASP, right? Roughly.
Yes. Less than 1 year. Yes.
Okay.
And then I stayed for 13 years at the next one.
Wow.
Because, basically we were working with open source, working on nice projects, developing applications for nice customers. And I really, basically built my own team there with hiring students just when they got out of school, and then training them to become, nice people, nice developers. People who liked working with customers, we started. So I started working with PHP, and then I switched to Java at some point.
How was the switch for you? Crazy, right? You say, okay, this is PHP is that nice, and Java is so complicated.
It was a bit crazy, and especially because when I switched. We started working with something that wasn't very common back at the time. It was something from Ars Digita, an old company who was working on CMS.
Okay.
And Ars Digita was later purchased by RedHat.
Okay.
And it was called the RedHat Web Application Framework. And it was a big framework to develop CMS. It was quite complex, relatively slow to start, relatively slow to build. And it made the experience relatively hard. But in the end, we were able to get something working and get the customers happy. So that's the important point. And then I switched to more lightweight Java with Spring, Tomcat, Hibernate, and that was my first contact with Hibernate.
Okay, with which Java version you started? I guess 1.6, right?
No, I think it was, I started with Java 4. I did some internship. I used Java a bit in one of my internships, and it was Java 4. And I really started using it professionally with 5.
Okay.
So it was the beginning of generics,
annotations,
and things like that. Yes.
Annotations, big one. This was the biggest impact on Java code, I would say, annotations.
Yeah, annotation, and I think generics made a bit more impact when I started using Java 5, because we were playing with a JDBC clustering solution. I don't remember. I think it was named Sequoia. It was a solution from a company called Continuant. And they were...
What's the name?
Continuant. I don't know if they are...
because I also played with similar solution, and my solution was C-JDBC, cluster JDBC. So you could have even different RAID levels in JDBC where it replicated different databases. So I was just curious what you used.
Yes, I think it. I wonder if it was the version pre or Sequoia or the version after, but I think it was the same company.
Okay, now we just also look it up. So small world again.
Yes, and it was so it was a relatively complex solution, and they started migrating to 1.5 and generics, and they started being able to fix a lot of bugs, because somehow at some point they were adding things that shouldn't be added to the wrong list, or things like that. So you had objects of different types in the list where objects should be consistent. And yeah, a lot of bugs were fixed just by switching to Java 5 and starting to push the generics there.
Interesting. This CJDBC is hosted by Object Web, and the company is Sequoia.
Yes.
Interesting. So we used the same stuff, and the latest release of CJDBC was 2008, and the repository was in CVS. Interesting. So I'm just looking at this. So
I contributed a bit to this one.
Okay.
A few fixes, and back in the time, I contributed a lot to GForge. I don't know if you know that one, but it was a fork of SourceForge, started by one of the SourceForge contributors. So SourceForge was open source for a while, and at that point, it was the only project hosting solution that was open source. So if you wanted to host open source, even proprietary software development in your company, SourceForge and then GForge was the only solution back then. So when I started at the company, they weren't using any source control or whatever. So one of the first thing I did when the person I replaced left the company, I just installed GForge, and I started contributing a lot to it. I installed a lot of them in several companies in France too. Okay. And it was way before GitHub was even a thing, way before GitLab was even a thing. And that was probably my first big open source contribution, my contribution to JForge. And then I contributed to quite a lot of open source software, mostly fixes, bug fixes, a few small features, contributed to PostgreSQL for a while. And it was I developed a PostgreSQL log analyzer.
Wow.
During these years.
And when you did it at the PHP time or later?
So I developed it in PHP because that was, so it was a tool that should be used by admins, by system administrators. And, they were allergic to Java. I think they still are allergic to Java system administrators. And I probably should have developed it in Python or Perl. But I was basically only fluent in PHP and Java at this time, so I settled for PHP. And it was, for a while, it was the PostgreSQL log analyzer used by everyone in the PostgreSQL community. It was used to detect slow queries, get reports about errors. It was used at Instagram before they got blocked by Facebook at the time to control their workloads and make sure that there wasn't any issues with the queries they were pushing to production. So that was I think my first two big open source contribution, GForge and this PostgreSQL analyzer called. So it was a French name. It was called PG Fouine, which a fouine is a small animal.
Okay.
Here in France. And that was the start of my open source contributions.
And you started the project? So you were the initiator of the project, or?
Yeah, this PostgreSQL log analyzer was the initiator. There was a Ruby one that was not working very well. It consumed. At my company, we were pushing huge logs to it, 2 gigabytes of logs per day. And the Ruby version wasn't working very well. It leaked a lot of memory and it was just not usable for our workload. So I started a brand new project at this time. And I worked on it for, I maintained it for 3 years, something like that. Oh, probably more than that, 5 or 6 years. And someone then developed another one based on the same principle in Perl this time, and it was basically the replacement for this software. But it was used by the community, the PostgreSQL community, for a long time.
And the name was Frin.
Fouine. It was called PG.
And small animal, you said. Is it only an animal only lives in France or in other places as well?
Yeah, I don't know the word in. So it's a weasel.
Okay.
In English, or a stone marten, and it's basically in French, a fouine is someone who looks for something, trying to find some information and things like that. So that was a good name for this particular thing, which was looking in huge logs and trying to find the important information for you.
Yes, I found now a contribution from you in 2007 for PGSQL, 2 fixes for the release notes from Guillaume.
Yes.
Guillaume Smith.
Yes, I contributed a bit to PostgreSQL for a while, mostly QA. I was.
So when you started the contributions, in which year? I mean, crazy, you were hyperactive. When was your first? When was your first open source commit? Year, roughly.
2003 for sure.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So it was in the ASP time. No, after the ASP time with the PHP company first, right?
Yeah, it was when I first joined the open source company where I.
What was the name? ObjectWeb.
13 years.
O2.
No, it was called. It makes English speaking people laugh, but it was called OpenWide.
Okay.
And it was a small company really dedicated to developing solutions for customers, solely based on open source software. So Java, PHP, also a lot of embedded software. So we had Pierre Fischer, who is a very important person in the embedded software world. We were working with, we also bought a hosting company later. So we were really a full open source company. We could, take your project from the beginning and get it, running in production, only based on open source software. And it was in 2003.
Mm-hmm. Seems like the company was renamed to Smile. And
so it wasn't renamed. We got booked by Smile.
Okay.
In 2015, I think. And I left the company shortly after, and I joined RedHat.
Okay.
Just when the company was bought by Smile.
Interesting. So at OpenWhite, what you did a lot of. You started with PHP, then switched to Java,
Yes.
and mainly Spring and Tomcat, right?
Yes, Spring, Tomcat. We were using Wicket, Apache Wicket.
Actually, Wicket was nice but strange. This was because the idea of Wicket was that the Java code has to have the same structure as the page, which I appreciated. But strangely, the designers didn't like that. They wanted to have more flexibility, and also strangely, in my early Java or early, when was it? 2010 maybe, yeah, roughly 2010. This was the time frame. This was the big times of Wicket. My designers, they preferred JSF over Wicket, because in JSF you can have the structure of JSF can be completely different to the Java backend. For us, Java developers, Wicket was nicer because it was more conventional configuration. So you can have, don't make me think. So it was exactly the same structure in both cases. So it was interesting dynamics back then. And I really like Wicket. It was a really nice concept with a nice book, about the cheese. I remember there was a book, with all the examples about cheese, because Wicket came from Netherlands, I think.
Yes, so Wicket is an interesting piece of software. I think we used it for years, and I liked it a lot. One thing I liked a lot is that it's basically component based, and you build your pages with components. The components are Java, and you have the HTML with a couple of Wicket specific markup. And that's pretty much it. And what I really liked about it is if you took someone who really never worked with Wicket or had very little experience about developing applications in Java, it was really easy to start with a Wicket app. You had the application class where you registered all your routing. And then you click and you get to the components, to the pages, to the components, and it's really easy to find what you are looking for. It was far less magic than Spring MVC, where it can be a bit harder to exactly understand what Spring is doing because there is a lot of magic. In Wicket, you don't have that much magic, and it's very easy to find what you're looking for.
Yeah, it's almost like Swing for the web, right? So you had a button, you can register action listener, and yeah.
Yes, exactly. And it works very well. It's very simple, so you can fix issues very easily there. It was using jQuery for the JavaScript layer. And it was, I think it's a very, very nice project, and it's still kicking and very much alive. And I think the team I created back in the days is still using it now. I think it really made us develop applications faster with less bugs. And it was a very nice thing.
Yeah, still around, and is still somehow active on. No more that active on GitHub. So the last commits were around 2019. So seems like.
Oh no, Wicket is still very much alive.
Yeah, if you go to Apache Wicket to GitHub, and the recent contributions, they are 2018 was the last burst, and then there are a few contributions in 2019 maybe, and.
I don't know. They are still releasing new versions. There was a new version in February 2022. So, yeah, I think they are still very much alive.
Yeah, they are alive. I just was curious what they are doing, because what's funny, I mentioned somewhere the struts. Oh, and then was curious whether struts is alive, and took a look at GitHub, and they are extremely active. So I was crazy, so just you would think the project is no more active, and they are very active. Actually, Apache threads too, and this is what I also did right now. I went to GitHub and wanted to see how they are doing, and a little bit quiet. Maybe they need some. Let's wait. I think, yeah, but they are publishing. There was the Wicket 9.8 15 days ago, so there are lots of small releases recently. Interesting.
Yeah, they are releasing quite often. So frankly, when we were working with that, we started using it, I think in 2013 or something like that. And maybe a bit before. And I mean, you could do whatever you wanted with it. It was very flexible, very simple. So they added new features later, but frankly, it was really feature complete and very flexible, and you could do exactly what you wanted.
And it was
with it,
somehow a nice Java code, right? So it was like object-oriented way of I would say, or component-oriented or object-oriented, because the Java code was really like modern Java, right? So you had the actionlessness, and you could structure the code as a Java code. It was not like string-oriented, right, where you just listened for strings coming from the front end and did something with it. It was nice. So you joined Red Hat. So what was your pitch? You wanted to join as a Spring developer, or what was the point?
So basically, when Smile bought my old company, Emmanuel Bernard from the Hibernate team contacted me and said, "Oh, Guillaume, I knew you were very well at your company until now, but maybe you are looking for a change now that the situation is a bit different." And I said, "Oh, yes, we can certainly discuss that." And so we started discussing about Hibernate. I contributed to Hibernate Search for a while before that, because we were using it with this Spring Apache Wicket layer. We were also using
true.
Hibernate Search.
And Emmanuel was big in Hibernate Search, so he also know the Emmanuel in one point of time, I think, was one of the main maintainer of Hibernate.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, and he had lots of and what was fascinating about the Hibernate Search, what I really liked back then, was the cluster replications. What they did, that you can index on one node and send the updates to another node. And Emmanuel talked about this a lot at conferences. So yeah, exactly. So this is how Hibernate knew you, right? From the contributions to Hibernate Search.
Yes. Yes, exactly. And to be honest, even without the clustering thing, with Hibernate Search, you could have some very valid search features in your applications with no hassle. I mean, back in the time, you didn't have... So Apache Solr was already created, but you didn't... Elasticsearch, I think it was really the start of it. And just with a few annotations in your entities, you could push these things to Lucene and have a very nice search engine. And it made a lot of... So we were developing business applications for customers, and they were all very... Yeah, they really appreciated all the search features we were putting in the applications using Hibernate Search. So I found a few issues with it, with our workloads, with our specific Java models, and started fixing things there, discussing with Sane, Grinovero, to get this fixed, with Hardy, Ferencik too. And that's how they started to know me. And when Emmanuel contacted me, it went quite fast, and I basically joined the Hibernate team and started working on Hibernate Validator, Hibernate Search, and I also worked a bit on Hibernate ORM. Mostly, I think my main contribution to ORM is some improvement in the memory usage for large models. But apart from that, I worked a lot of Hibernate Validator 6, the Bean Validation 2 implementation, and also started the first experiments with pushing Hibernate Search events to Elasticsearch, which far later became Hibernate Search 6. But at the very first, it was a very lame experiment to see what would be the issues to push the indexing to an Elasticsearch server instead of Lucene. And we found all the issues, and then it was decided to basically rewrite Hibernate Search to make it relevant for Lucene, Elasticsearch, and why not other indexing solution.
Yeah, I also used Hibernate Search a lot. So there was a couple of startups who used Whitefly, Java E, Hibernate. And with the Hibernate Search, you had almost like, Google search experience, right? So you can write it easily. And we had JPA with a Vue Hibernate specific annotations, and it just worked great back then. I think it was around 2014, in 2015 in my case, I think, where we used that, the solution. So you became one of the main maintainer of Hibernate Search?
I don't know if I was one of the main maintainers of Hibernate Search. I worked on it a lot. Now it's Johan Rodier who is the main person behind Hibernate Search 6. So funnily enough, he was working at my company. So at OpenWhite before. And when I left for RedHat, the Hibernate team was looking for someone else, and I was like, oh, Johan would be perfect for that. So he left OpenWhite too, and started at RedHat shortly after. And so as for my Hibernate contribution, I worked a lot on Hibernate Validator. I'm the project lead for Validator.
Oh, okay.
To be honest, it's not very active right now. We fix bugs and things like that, but we didn't add very complex features for a while.
It's almost feature complete what you can add, right? In one point of time, it's hard to imagine.
Yes, so we worked a lot on improving the performances of it, trying to. So usually it's not a problem, but we had people using Validator to validate in batch. So they had a lot of data, and they wanted to push them to Validator to validate that the data were okay. And for this kind of things, Validator has an important overhead. So we worked a lot on improving memory allocation, reducing CPU usage, and things like that to make it more relevant for this sort of use cases. But yes, we don't have big plans for features in Hibernate Validator. We will need to switch to Jakarta EE10 very soon. So that's the project that we are working on. So Hibernate Validator mainly. Also, I contributed significantly to search and a lot less to ORM. I did a few patches for ORM, but not that much.
So is anybody left in OpenWhite, or everyone is left the company and now Smile is, a lonely person smiling somewhere?
Yeah, so Smile is basically the biggest open source company in France now. They bought a lot of the small ones.
About that.
Yes, they are expanding in Europe. They bought a lot of the small companies. They recently booked, a few years ago, the people behind Symfony, the PHP framework. So they are part of Smile now too. I think most of the people who, at OpenWide, we had a lot of people staying for a while. I stayed there for 13 years, and a lot of the people I hired, stayed there for forever. When Smile bought the company, obviously it wasn't the same company anymore, so a lot of us left. My team at OpenWhite created a company to continue working with the framework I initiated at OpenWhite. So I think they are still working with Spring, Wicket, Hibernate Search to develop business applications with the framework, the very framework we were using back in the time.
Okay. So and then you switched from Hibernate Search and Validator to what?
At some point, I got a call from Emmanuel, and he was like,
Again?
Again, yes. And he was like, oh, we need... So, we have this new secret project going on at RedHat. We need Hibernate Validator support in it. So it would be nice if you could work on it. For now, it's not something that should be done in the open. We want to make a big splash and have something relatively featureful before communicating about it. So please start working on that. So
how secret was Quarkus inside Red Hat? You knew about that?
So I knew there was a project going on because Sane was working on it. So it was like, oh, I'm working on a secret project, so I won't be able to work as much as before on Hibernate for a while. And I was like, okay. So we knew there was something going on, but only the people really invested in it were aware of what it really was.
Mm-hmm. And what's the name known?
So it was called Protean back in the time, and the first name was Shamrock.
Yeah, exactly.
When it was created, that's because Stuart, who created the thing, was doing that at an Irish pub called Shamrock. And so it was a code name first, then it became Protean, and then we needed...
What is Protean? What does it mean?
So I don't even know if it has a meaning.
Okay.
It was... so apparently it's something that can change its shape. But I mean, it was more like a cool name.
Okay.
And then we were looking, when we had to make it public, we needed a name that would be validated by legal, that wouldn't cause any issues with other brands or other companies, and Protean wasn't an option. I don't remember exactly the issue. I think there was another company called Protean, which was working in a field, probably in the IT field, so it wasn't a good option. So we had to find a new name, and at the end it was Quarkus. But yeah, it was a relatively secret project. We all knew that something was going on, but we had no idea what it was.
Okay.
And it started, I think it started far before, I mean, I remember when we made it public, we had this, the people at Micronaut saying, oh, they just did the same thing that we are doing for Micronaut. And in fact, the Quarkus project was started far earlier, just that it wasn't public. And so I started working on validator support in Quarkus. It was relatively hard because the whole concept was entirely new. The fact that we were doing things at build time, GraalVM was very, very new. So all the concepts in Quarkus were, a bit disturbing for someone used to Spring, Wildfly. It was really a brand new thing. So it was really about trying to find a way to integrate all the technologies we had with new paradigms and getting it to be optimized for the Quarkus behavior being, we need to do more things at build time. So how can Hibernate Validator be adapted to push more work at build time and less when the application is starting. So that was the start of my involvement in Quarkus. And so I did that, started fixing bugs in various areas. And in the end, I was basically fully involved in it. So I'm still part of the Hibernate team. My main, I'm officially an Hibernate team member.
Okay.
But yeah, I spend nearly all of my time working on Quarkus. It was really an engineering, a software developer position at the beginning. I was coding and getting things working, fixing issues, improving consistency all over the place, things like that. And then things started to evolve a bit. And I started working more on the processes, started releasing Quarkus when it became public. So the first versions were released by Clément Escoffier, and then I took the lead for the releases and released Quarkus for a long while, nearly all the versions until now. And I worked on improving the processes, connecting people, making sure that all the persons have the right information at the right time. And that's more my role now. I'm more like, connecting people, fostering the community, improving the processes, making sure we are working at full speed and that nothing is in the way for people to make things work in Quarkus.
So what are the challenges right now then? So what can be improved?
It's an interesting question. I think so at some point the main challenge was that we were going very fast and we were wasting a lot of time doing things like just putting the right milestone labels, ping the right persons and things like that on issues. We have a lot of issues coming. Just pinging the right person to have a look at the issue and things like that were taking so much time. And this, we figured it out. We have a GitHub bot now handling most of these things. And it's really a relief, especially because I was the person doing most of these very, very, very boring tasks. And so this is somehow solved. I think the main challenge is that we want to keep innovating, and Quarkus is a very large project now, and we want to keep innovating. So we need to make sure that the fact that it's a large project doesn't slow us down too much on innovation, that implementing new ideas is not blocked by the fact that, the project is huge. So we are starting to... We only have part of the solution for that. We started the quarkiverse, which is an ecosystem for Quarkus extensions, where we try to push the new extensions rather than getting them in the main Quarkus project, where basically anytime you need to change something on Quarkus, you end up with a gazillion of extensions to build and to make sure everything works and things like that. So the fact that we have the Quarkiverse, moving as extensions there helps a lot with keeping the core relatively lean. So it's still far too big, but at least it's better now and it's not growing too much. We are also working on trying to improve the documentation. We have a lot of projects, and one thing that also is relatively hard is to get things completely finalized to put them in the hands of the user. The CLI for Quarkus is a good example. We had a a nice prototype at some point. We had a rewrite of it, and it's now very, very nice to use, and you can do most of the tasks you are doing with Quarkus with a nice CLI instead of the Maven commands, which are relatively complex and not very relevant if you are using Gradle. So we are pushing to make the CLI a thing, but you have the code, but then you need to publish it to SDKman, Chocolate, and things like that. You need to update all the documentation to make use of it. So anytime we have to push something, it's a huge amount of work to really get it to the user. So you have the initial coding, and then you have to evolve the whole ecosystem, the whole Quarkus thing, to make sure that the user can find it. Oh, and that's really I think that's one of the main challenge, keeping the innovation pace while we have a more and more complex ecosystem. Also, getting a framework to be a general purpose framework is very hard now, mostly because the Java ecosystem is extremely huge. So you support something, and then you always have someone saying, oh, I'm using this library instead, and it doesn't work. How can I do that? Or I'm using this one, and it doesn't work because... And so to get a general purpose framework supporting all the Java ecosystem is a huge amount of work. So we are working with the communities of these various projects. Sometimes we have a specific ClassLoader implementation, and a lot of Java components are not really aware of ClassLoaders or sufficiently rigorous about how they are using ClassLoaders. So we have to fix a few things in some of the external libraries. ArcTunit, for example, got a few fixes from us recently because it wasn't working very well with Quarkus. So that's the thing. We started as a small project for people who were wanting to try new thing, and now we have a lot more users saying, oh, I'm using that, and that, and I want to continue using that with Quarkus. So how can I do it? Mm-hmm. And we have to provide an answer for that, either by integrating the technology somehow, fix a few things, maybe get the people contributing to Quarkus with test cases, with fixes and things like that. And that's really how we want to work, trying to get the community to grow.
Maybe, just on a spontaneous idea, this would be a great community role, like a Quarkus integrator, because it's a low risk for you. I mean, in worst case, the integration won't work. And you could have a badge, community integrators, get a t-shirt or whatever you can do. And someone would just, care about providing the fixes for a nice open source project to Quarkus. So you can involve, a new community members, because actually, if I would say, it's just lots of fiddling, but it's not like, they don't have to understand the low-level stuff usually. It is like, there's a ClassLoader issue or whatever. There are two open source projects, how to integrate them. And they could work with the open source project and with Quarkus. And this would be actually a great way to become visible in Quarkus community, right? So
yes, exactly. And we have quite a lot of contributors starting with Quarkus this way. The quarkiverse extensions are mostly maintained by people outside of RedHat. So we have contributors to the Quarkus main repository. So there are Red Hat contributors, and there are external contributors too. Mm-hmm. We don't make a difference between them. Some of the external contributors are committers on the main repository. Some of the Red Hat ones are not. There are no differences between you are Red Hat or not. And in the Quarkiverse, we have a mix of extensions maintained by Red Hatters because we needed that for something. I maintain the Quarkus GitHub API extensions, the Quarkus GitHub extensions, because I need them. And then we have extensions maintained by community members. The Vault extension, for instance, is maintained by a community member. And that's a good way to get involved in Quarkus. You need something to work. You want it better integrated with Quarkus. You don't always need an extension. So that's something that must be clear. You need an extension when you want it very integrated with the Quarkus behaviors, with how Quarkus works. Also, if you have some issues with native executables and GraalVM, an extension might be nice to make things easier for the users. But you don't always need one. But when you need one, you can create one very easily. We have commands to scaffold a new extension, and then you push them to the quarkiverse. And we are very keen to get new contributors, maintainers for quarkiverse extensions.
How many extensions do we have right now? Core extension and quarkiverse?
Several hundreds, for sure. I think last time we checked, it was 300.
300?
Yes. Some are internal, and and that's not counting all the extensions coming from Camel Quarkus, because so the Camel integration in Quarkus is coming with a gazillion of extensions for all the technologies that Camel supports. I think the 300 is without the Camel Quarkus extensions.
No, not bad.
And it's another 300.
Did the Quarkus popularity surprise you?
So I think all the people working on Quarkus knew that we were up to something. I mean, we knew that there was something interesting in Quarkus. We weren't sure that other people will take the time to understand what was new about Quarkus and what it could bring to them. But we knew that there was something about it, something special about it. It was bringing something new to the Java ecosystem. And so I'm pleasantly surprised that it's so popular, but I mean, I was kind of expecting that people would find out that it was solving some of the problems they have. And I'm not only talking about the fast startup or things like that. I'm also talking about the dev mode, which is very, very practical. I mean, I see some people sometimes when they are evaluating Quarkus against Spring, they say, "Oh, dev mode, we really need that." And I'm like, did you really try it? Because I mean, now I'm developing my applications with dev mode. I don't restart my applications at all, and it's just all working. And there is the dev UI, which is very practical. You have a lot of nice things in the dev mode. And Quarkus has something very unique, I think. And it's not just one thing, it's a combination of a ton of small things that makes it very nice to work with. I think the best compliment I had about Quarkus was some things telling me, so at my company, a ton of projects that we weren't able to do because we didn't have the time. It was just not possible to invest enough to get these things done. And he told me, well, with Quarkus, we were able to make some of these projects a reality. And because we were faster and we were able to invest just the right amount of time to get these things done. And I mean, like, if we are able to help people making things that shouldn't be possible in other ways, I think that's a big win, and that's a really nice thing to do.
Some final thoughts from my side regarding the development tooling and mode. So I do the monthly AHX TV show where the entire month I'm gathering question, and once the first month of the month at 8 p.m. CET, I'm answering all the questions. And in the recent video, someone asked me the question, why we need Quarkus dev mode. And I will answer this the next time. But what I will discuss is I have some small projects which I'm not using the Quarkus dev tools. And the reason being is Quarkus is so fast. So what I'm doing, I have a small shell script which starts Quarkus, and behind the scenes it builds, the jar and copies the jar to a folder of my machine where I use the Quarkus tool, and then I'm basically done. So it is with Quarkus DevTools I would be faster, but the project is on a later stage. It is not like I'm changing a lot, So for me it is easier not to use the Quarkus Dev in this particular mode, and I'm just using the standard Quarkus build system with script java -jar, and it just starts, and this is fast enough. But the absolute killer feature of dev mode is serverless, because what you can do, you can run Lambda function as a Quarkus application locally. And what Quarkus does, it creates this function on zip, and you can push it to Amazon, for instance, cloud. So what you have, you are in the unique position where you can use Quarkus dev mode to run Lambdas locally and push them behind the scenes to the cloud. So which is great. So I would say this Quarkus dev mode is great. The problem Quarkus dev mode has is that the production mode is also very fast. So if you build everything with Maven and just start Quarkus without the Quarkus dev, is still fast enough. So for me, sometimes I say, okay, I get rid of the Quarkus dev mode. I would just use the production mode because it's fast enough, and Quarkus dev mode is crazy fast. So it is not like a huge difference. If this production mode would be like 5 seconds longer, then we are talking. Then I will always use Quarkus dev mode. But because the usual mode, I don't know how to call it, the build mode is fast enough, I'm using the Quarkus dev mode. Also interesting. So I'm actually surprised a bit about the popularity, because what I knew is that Quarkus would be highly appreciated by all the Whitefly developers, for instance, and the Thorntail and what was the name before, and it was Whitefly Micro? No Whitefly Micro. What was the name before?
Swarm.
Swarm. Yeah, Whitefly Swarm, exactly. And so I did recently, or last year, a workshop about serverless Java with Quarkus. And what I'm using Quarkus, it looks like a Whitefly application. So I'm using, all microprofile APIs, then Jakarta E API, sometimes WebSockets. Bean Validator is also part of Java E, Bean Validation, Jakarta E. And not that much Quarkus-specific stuff. So just focusing on the standards. But what I noticed in the latest workshop, there were a lots of attendees who never used microprofile, and they want to migrate from Spring to Quarkus. This is what I wouldn't suspect. And then I said, okay, this is funny for me, because all the years I heard Spring is lightweight and Java E was bloated, and now I have exactly the same APIs, so I didn't change anything. So from Whitefly to Quarkus, my applications looks almost exactly the same. And now people coming back to my old Java E code, which runs on Quarkus now, and say, okay, they migrate. I'm sorry, but and what's also interesting, they told me that the Spring was lightweight and Spring Boot is bloated. I said, okay, this is strange, because the Spring, it was before Spring Boot. So they say, yeah, but the package, everything is. I don't even know. I have to say, I never did a project with Spring or Spring Boot. I was just in 2 times, spent some time consulting, because they hired me because they thought what they have is Java E. So they hired me, and it was Spring Boot. So I helped them, and the application was nice. It looked nice, and it worked nicely. So there was not an issue there. The problem was in Java, not in Spring Boot. But this was the observation, and this is what I didn't thought about. That there are a lot of Spring and Spring Boot developers who are aware of Quarkus, and they're willing to migrate to Quarkus. And I showed them actually microprofile with Quarkus, and they say, this is really nice. And it's okay, this is the first time in the history, where I can show you enterprise code and you like it. So this is my surprise. So that the Jakarta E and microprofile community will appreciate Quarkus, this was clear from the beginning. Because what is genius about Quarkus, and I have to admit, I didn't saw this coming. So I got hint from. Back then, I created a screencast for OpenShift for RedHat, and they said to me, we are working on something and you will like it. It's like, I don't believe it, because, Thorntail was pointless for me. a whitefly swarm. I never got it because I always used the whitefly full. It was fast enough. I said, okay, what you can do? I mean, maybe you get whitefly micro or whatever, which is 5K smaller. But the idea that you can deploy at build time is genius. This is actually the crucial point if you think about this. Instead of using reflection at deployment time, you use bytecode generation at build time, and this is what I really like. Still, if I think about Quarkus, I see this is a genius idea, a simple idea but genius. And what I also see in Quarkus is that you notice it in documentation. You notice this in the everywhere that the developers really care about Quarkus, so they are more excited, contributed to Quarkus. So if you look at the documentation, I'm using Quarkus a lot, and you see, the entire documentation is really nice. It is mostly consistent. I have to say I can remember some inconsistencies, but I forgot about them. So I mean, this is really high quality, everything. It looks nice and it feels great. So this is a huge difference to some enterprise projects back then, because this was like someone wrote documentation because they had to. And my feeling is now in Quarkus is different. The people like to contribute to Quarkus, and you feel that. This is the difference.
Yes, I think we are all really passionate about it. And from the beginning, I mean, that's what I was telling before. We all knew that there was something special and we were onto something. So, yeah, there was a real passion. I mean, the months before the official release and the months after, we were all working like crazy, but I mean really crazy. And we really thought that it was something amazing. And the fact is that most people see, the features that are on the outside. So you see what we document and things like that. But you have an interesting point on the bytecode generation thing. The way Quarkus is built, you can do a ton of things with simple bytecode generation. So a few weeks ago, we had some issues with GitHub API because it's creating some bridge methods which are confusing ByteBuddy and Mockito. And I was like, oh, this is annoying. How can I fix that? And now in my Quarkus extension, I just adjust the bytecode of the GitHub API to remove all these bridge methods which are there for backward compatibility and that I don't need. And I can do that I will write a blog post about that soon, but it was like 10 lines of code or something like that. And I just filter things. And it's the same for the Quarkus GitHub app extension I did. I use a ton of bytecode generation, and it's very simple with a small library called Gizmo that is in the Quarkus ecosystem. And that's the nice thing about Quarkus. It's you can really do. If you just want to develop an application with the existing extensions, there are a lot of them, and you can do it in no time. But you can also develop some nice extensions which uses the annotation index to find something and then generate some code. And in the end, you can really do very fun things and very efficient things with the Quarkus architecture itself. So it's not just an end user thing. You can, as an extension developer, you can do amazing things. And we also have, we have these things called the Quarkus platform, which includes the Quarkus core extension and a few others. And we know that we have some Quarkus users having their own platforms with their own extensions in-house, and they are developing extensions to for their specific purposes, their specific business purposes, and that's a nice thing about Quarkus. You can extend it very easily. the architecture is really about how you can push things at build time, and that's how the architecture is built. So anytime you want to play with your build and improve things at build time or generate things at build time, Quarkus is a very nice contender for it. And then you can do whatever you want. You can develop CLI application, server application, serverless or whatever, and have your own extensions and fun things. And that's what very interesting about Quarkus. And I think it's still something that is not that well known. The fact that with developing extensions, you can do amazing things that are, that go far beyond what you can do with other frameworks.
Perfect. So where people can find you on the internet, your blog, your Twitter.
Oh, so I'm mostly working in the shadow.
Okay.
So I don't tweet that much. I tweet more with the Quarkus.io account to announce releases than with my personal account, to be honest.
Yeah, perfect.
So I'm with. So I still have a GitHub account with is jsmet underscore. But basically, you can find it on my GitHub account. That's where I'm. And most people find me with GitHub notifications because I'm reading basically everything that is going on about Quarkus. Because as I like to say it, I like to connect people and be aware of what's going on. So anytime you need me, you just ping me anywhere on GitHub, and I will be around. And that's that's the magic of it. And I will. I'm not a very public person, to be honest. This invitation is it's a bit different from what I usually do.
Okay.
I'm usually working in the shadows and get things done.
So now you're in the light, AXFM light.
Yeah, so I did a few talks here and there. So some people saw me somewhere in Slovenia and in France, but that's pretty much it. I'm more like.
So I got you. You enjoy shadow and bad weather. So if you have, you are in the shadow, in the dark, stormy dark with lots of rain and wind, you are happy. Thank you, and see you next time.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you. Thanks a lot.